Hey everyone, welcome to WittCode. In this video, we're going to learn about the React useMemo hook, including how it improves a React application's performance. So, as a quick demonstration of what the useMemo hook can do, we have two apps here, one called Expensive and one called Cheap. Both of these are what we're going to build in this video, but in this expensive app, every time you click re-render app, there's a state change which causes a very expensive function to be reran. And you can see that by what's logged to the console. So you click re-render app, it calculates, takes about 5 seconds or so, and then it says finish calculating people. You click re-render app, and this runs again, and it keeps running every single time the app is re-rendered. However, if we use the useMemo hook, in this instance, on the initial render, this expensive calculation is running, so we can see calculating, and then any initial render, this expensive calculation isn't ran again. So we can see all those calculations aren't logged to the console. But this is essentially what the useMemo hook can do. It's used to improve a React application's performance by caching a value. And this cache value can then be used to prevent the unnecessary re-rendering of a component. And so we'll demonstrate it by recreating these two GIFs that I have here. But before we understand the useMemo hook, we need to first understand something called memoization. And what memoization is it's a technique that remembers the output of a function rather than recalculating it. In other words, memoization caches output values based on the input. If the input has been used before, then the cached output value is returned as opposed to recalculating it. This increases the efficiency of an application as it minimizes the amount of time expensive functions or computations need to be ran or recomputed. And memoization is the technique that the useMemo hook uses to cache a value. So to demonstrate this, let's open VS Code and let's initially create a simple React app that is the one we see inside this GIF. So I'm just going to paste this code in here. And now we have our application on the right and our code on the left. And so specifically, this app is expensive because all it does is display a list of 5 people. However, this list takes 5 seconds to be computed. So this comes from this calculate people function. And the way we do this is we get 5 seconds from now, we get the current date. And then while the current date is less than 5 seconds from now, we just keep calculating the date. And then after 5 seconds, we return this list. So this is why this is a very expensive calculation. And now, because this is expensive, every time our app re-renders, so clicking this button re-renders the app by changing the state here, this function will be ran. So we'll click re-render and we'll have to calculate, which basically means wait 5 seconds from now until this array is returned again. And this will happen every single time we click this button. So this can easily be fixed by using the useMemo hook, so we can easily increase this application's performance. Specifically, we'll use the useMemo hook to cache or memoize the people array, so this array that's returned here. So first, we import useMemo from the React library. We can actually import it here, useMemo. Now, the value we want to memoize is this array of people, so all we need to do is place the hook here. So this calculate people method returns an array here, and because it returns it, we're memoizing it right here. So the first argument to this useMemo hook is a function that calculates the value to cache. So we can see we have an arrow function that returns this array that this function returns. And this function that the useMemo takes no arguments and should return a value. And the useMemo hook also takes a second argument, which is a list of dependencies. So we can see we have an empty list of dependencies right here as the second argument. So here, what this code says, we are telling the useMemo hook to only run on the initial render. This is because we have not passed any dependencies. So like the useEffect hook, this means on initial render. And this is all it takes to significantly increase the performance of our React app. So if we click re-render app now, we don't get this calculation running. Instead, we just get this logged as it re-renders the component on this state change, but we don't have to do this expensive calculation anymore because it's only done on the initial render because the value is cached. And that's all it really is. But now let's change this example to use dependencies. In other words, let's have our useMemo hook memoize a new value when one of its dependencies changes. So what we're going to create here is this GIF. So this one right here, we have a checkbox which has a dependency that the useMemo hook will rely on. And when we click re-render app, nothing will change because the value will be cached by useMemo. But if we uncheck or toggle this checkbox, then a new value is cached, so the app re-renders. So let me just paste this code in here. So if we look for our useMemo hook, which is here, the app is essentially the same, except now we have a dependency called cool. And this cool dependency is a state value right here that gets changed whenever the checkbox is toggled. So in other words, we skip this calculate people function unless this cool state variable has changed, which is done by toggling this checkbox here. So you can see checkbox on change, we set cool to be whatever it was, the opposite value of what it currently is. So now, actually, if we open up our application, if we click re-render app, we don't get that expensive calculation running, but if we do click this checkbox, then we can see that the expensive calculation is running because this dependency cool is changed, which is the state value. So this value, calculate people returns, which is this array, is no longer cached, and we cache a new value. But then when you re-render the app, because the same cached value is used, we don't run this expensive calculation. So basically, in other words, if the dependencies of useMemo have changed, then the function is ran again and the new value is stored. If the dependencies have not changed, then React will reuse the same value and the function will not be ran again. But so this is my video on the useMemo hook. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try and get back to you. But besides that, I want to thank you for liking and subscribing today, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a good one.